Good morning. I really love this theme, this marriage of employee and customer experience, because I live this on a daily basis. So I focus a lot on employee experience, but my wife focuses on customer experience. So I'm literally married to this topic. You know, it's really fascinating to think about how the world of work is changing. I mean, think back a decade, 2 decades ago, and look at where we've come today. Amazing changes that we're starting to see. But we spend so much time in the day-to-day aspects of work that sometimes it's hard for us to take a step back and really realize how much change we're starting to see. So I want you to imagine for a minute that you are an alien, and you've come down to planet Earth to make some observations about us Earthlings. And you come down in your little spaceship, you park it somewhere, and you just hang out for a bit. And think about some of the things that you would observe about the people of planet Earth. Chances are you would first notice that there are around 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. And then, depending on where you look, the average life expectancy is around 70 to 80 years. And from all these people on planet Earth, these 7.5 billion people almost all of them do this thing called work. And from all of those people on planet Earth, and from almost all of those that do this thing called work, almost all of them don't like their jobs. Consider for a minute that if you were to look up the word employee in the dictionary, you would find that synonyms for the word employee include cog, servant, and slave. If you look up the word manager in the dictionary, you'll find that synonyms for the word manager include slave driver, boss, and my favorite one, zookeeper. And if you look up the word work in the dictionary, you will find that synonyms for the word work include daily grind, drudgery, and struggle. Now, if you put these 3 things together, we are all cogs working for zookeepers as we go about our daily struggle. Wow. Work sucks. And this is literally how we have built our organizations over the last 10, 50, 100, 150 years on top of these outdated ways of thinking about work. Has anybody seen the movie Office Space? Okay, that is supposed to be a comedic film. A lot of people watch it as if it's some kind of a documentary. I mean, you actually see people watching that movie going, oh God, I have to deal with that all the time. It's supposed to be a comedy, not a documentary. There used to be a time when you could work 9 to 5. There used to be a time when you could smoke in the office. And there used to be a time when if you had a job that you wanted to fill at your company, you would put up the job posting online, and one by one, candidates would show up to your organization, and they would try to convince you why they should work there. They would talk about all the wonderful schools that they went to. They would talk about their accomplishments, all the wonderful things that they did during the course of their careers and their lives. And they would try to explain why you should hire them. Now look at the world that we live in today. You don't work 9 to 5. You don't smoke in the office. And today, when you have a job that you want to fill, and when these prospective candidates come through your doors, now all of a sudden, they are the ones asking you the questions. What is it like to work here? What tools and technologies am I going to be using? What is the leadership style like? Will I feel a sense of purpose and mission? And so what we're starting to see is that now you have to convince candidates why they should work for you. And this is a very, very different way for us to think about work and talent, because we have never done this before. In the past, it used to be them convincing us. Now we convince them. Very different way for us to think about work. And how have organizations always done this? Well, companies typically use 2 approaches to try to convince other people why they should work there. The first thing that organizations do is we tell a compelling story about what it's like to work at our organizations, right? I mean, we've all heard those stories, wonderful places to work, the managers love you, it's fantastic. Now, I've tried online dating before I got married, and if you've ever tried online dating, you'll know that sometimes the person whose profile you see online and the person who shows up to the date, not the same person. Or it could just be me, I don't know. And so I think the same thing is happening inside of organizations around the world. On paper, we all want to be amazing. On paper, we all, again, wonderful managers, great technologies, beautiful workspaces, flexible work. It is fantastic. And then people show up to work and they're like, what the hell happened here? Complete bait and switch, right? So that's been the first way that organizations try to convince people why they should work there. They try to tell this compelling story. Now imagine for a minute what would happen if every organization around the world was brutally honest about what it was like to work there. And so when you had candidates that show up to your organizations, and when they would ask you, what is it like to work here? You said, well, let me tell you. It says you're going to work 40 hours. You will probably work 60. You're going to be commuting to work, from work. I hope you like sitting in a box. We have some technologies here from the 80s. They work. Enjoy using that. Your manager is probably going to yell at you at some conference calls and take credit for your work. We have a flexible work program, but if I were you, I wouldn't take advantage of it because your coworkers and managers are going to think you're lazy and you don't want to show up to work, and so I wouldn't do that. You want to work here? Who in their right loony-toony mind is going to say yes to that? Nobody. So again, we tell this wonderful story about what it's like to work at our organizations. So that's been strategy number one that almost every company uses. Strategy number two that a lot of organizations use is this idea of investing in employee engagement. I'm willing to bet that every organization in this room has some kind of initiative going on around employee engagement. I mean, how many of you have something going on in your companies around employee engagement? Put your hands up. Okay, almost everybody has something going on with this. And what's really interesting about employee engagement is that we have never spent more time, more money, more resources on employee engagement programs. Yet for some reason, the scores around the world are either going nowhere or they go down. How does that make any sense? You would think that if we spend more time, more money, more resources on something, that something would be improving. But it's not. So why is that happening? It turns out that inside of most organizations around the world, they actually view employee engagement as an adrenaline shot. So what do I mean when I say an adrenaline shot? Now, let's say on day one, somebody starts working at your company. I think it's safe and fair to say that on day one, nobody ever shows up to your company saying this place sucks. Doesn't happen, right? On day one, people are genuinely excited to be there. They want to make an impact. They want to know the tools that they're going to be using. Who are they going to be working with? They want to know all of this sort of stuff. They are excited to be there. And then something happens over time where gradually our satisfaction and engagement levels go a little bit down. And right around here, the company says, hey, it's time for our annual engagement survey. So we do the annual employee engagement survey, and we get a 62. And we freak out. And oftentimes what happens is we turn to HR and we say, hey guys, that 62 is not acceptable. We need like a 98 on there. Can you turn that 62 into a 98? And then a bunch of business leaders get together and they say, all right, who's got some ideas here? How do we boost employee engagement and happiness at the company? And somebody raises their hand and they say, oh, I got a brilliant idea. Why don't we do hot yoga on Tuesdays? Genius. And guess what happens? Temporarily, the satisfaction, the happiness does go up. But then it goes back down. And then we do another engagement survey, and somebody else says, all right, we did the hot yoga thing. What else you got? And somebody says, what about free food on Friday or Soul Cycle on Mondays? And then, genius, we do that. And guess what? The scores go up. And this is what we see inside of most organizations. If you notice, you're not really going higher. You basically stay at the same point. You cycle up and down and up and down. It's like a yo-yo. Now, the really fascinating thing about this is that oftentimes when employees start working for organizations, when organizations say that they're investing in employee engagement, I always like to ask them why. Why are you doing this? And they say, well, because we want to empower our people. But your employees start off working at your company empowered already. What happens is through outdated technologies and rules and policies and bureaucracies, you disempower them. And then after you do that, you say you want to empower them again? Kind of weird, right? So that approach doesn't work. And the reason why focusing on these just perks doesn't work is because of a concept in psychology known as the hedonic treadmill. Some of you might be familiar with this concept. The hedonic treadmill is a theory in psychology which basically says that as humans, we're very good at adapting to stuff. Which means that if you show up to work one day and all of a sudden you have free food everywhere, that will be cool for a while. Might be cool for a couple months. And then what happens? You show up to work one day, and you say, well, yeah, of course there should be free food. I expect it. How could there not be free food? What else you got? And the organization says, whoa, wait, but hot yoga, Soul Cycle. That's cool for a couple months too. And then you show up to work one day and you're like, yeah, I expect that. What else you got? And then what starts to happen over time is that you teach and you condition your employees to be part of your organization because of things that they get. Now imagine for a minute you're in a relationship with somebody just because you get nice stuff. What do you think happens one day when that person can no longer give you the nice stuff? You leave and you go elsewhere. And this is exactly what we see inside of organizations around the world. When you can no longer give them enough nice stuff, the employees say, see you later, on to the next one. So you don't want to purely create an organization that's based on free food and perks and benefits and all these kind of lavish, crazy things that are out there. Because again, that conditions employees to be part of your company just because of things that they get, not because of value that they bring, not because of value that they get. So if this approach doesn't work, and we're starting to see a lot of challenges with this concept of employee engagement, what does work? What's next? There is a psychologist by the name of Thomas Gilovich, and he did some really cool research a couple years ago, and he looked at what happens to our satisfaction level if you invest in a physical good or if you invest in an experience. And what he found is that over time, if you invest in a physical good, your satisfaction starts to go down. But if you invest in an experience, over time, your satisfaction goes up. And this is what the world's leading organizations have figured out. How do we make it feel like when employees start working for us, they didn't just buy something, they didn't just transact with us, they signed up for an experience. So what does that actually mean and what does that actually look like? Now, to try to understand employee experience, I studied 252 organizations around the world. I went through numerous case studies, articles, research reports. I conducted interviews. I did all sorts of stuff out there. And if employee engagement has basically become this idea of investing in perks and benefits to distract employees from the reality of what it's like to work there, employee experience has become this idea of changing the core workplace practices inside of your organization around your people. So changing the core workplace practices of your organization around your people. That's very different than just focusing on perks or benefits. So again, I mentioned I studied 252 organizations around the world. So from the 252 organizations that I looked at, the breakdown looked like this. Only 6% of organizations do an amazing job of investing in employee experience. And the 252 companies that I looked at were all the Fortune 100, all the Fortune 100 best places to work, Glassdoor's top 50 large best places to work, and then a couple others that I had a personal interest in. 6% of companies are doing an amazing job of investing in what is becoming known as employee experience. 20% of organizations I looked at and I'm like, how are you guys still in business? And interestingly enough, some of them are filing for bankruptcy and disappearing. Half of organizations are either doing nothing or they're doing just a little bit just to kind of squeak by. But the encouraging thing is that 23% of organizations are doing a very good job. So I mentioned 6% of organizations. Who are these organizations? These aren't organizations like a Riot Games. These are organizations like a LinkedIn, a Facebook, an Airbnb, some of the typical organizations that you might expect to find on that kind of a list. So this is what the breakdown looks like, meaning that there is a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot that we can do to create better experiences for our people. But I really wanted to understand what's the ROI of doing this. Why does it make sense to invest in the experiences of your people? What is the outcome that you can expect to see? So I looked at a couple different things. The first thing that I looked at was a bunch of best of lists. So I took the experiential companies, the top 6% that I put together, and I compared those organizations against other best of lists that exist. And you are all familiar with these types of lists. Best places to work, customer satisfaction hall of fame, most innovative companies, most valuable brands, all these different types of lists. Organizations who do a better job of investing in employee experience appear on those lists 2 times as often, 5 times as often, up to 40 times as often. So clearly there's something going on here. Now, one of the interesting things that I want to bring your attention to is the customer service one. Because sometimes a lot of people say, well, how does this impact the customer side of things? Now imagine for a minute you go to a bank, you check in for a flight on a particular plane, you go to a supermarket. All these things are identical, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what bank you go to. It doesn't matter the supermarket that you go to. It doesn't matter the airplane that you fly on. I mean, all these companies, the process is the same. The phone carrier that you go with, it's pretty much the same thing. So how is it that some organizations are able to go above and beyond to create amazing customer experiences? How do they do that better than others if the process is the same? The answer is that those organizations invest in their people, and those people then go above and beyond to invest in the customers. In other words, when you unlock or when you invest in employee experience, it unlocks the discretionary effort of your people, and those people will create better experiences for your customers. So we start to see actual ROI here. I looked at a bunch of business metrics. I looked at turnover. I looked at average profit, average revenue per employee. I looked at all sorts of different metrics, headcount. And across the board, we see that organizations who invest in employee experience see tangible ROI, right? Dollars and cents. So clearly, there's something going on here. Now, the last thing that I looked at was stock price performance. And I looked around over a 5-year period. And again, I looked at the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, best places to work, all these different types of lists that are out there. And again, the experiential organizations outperformed every other category of organization that's out there. So clearly, again, there is something going on here as far as tangible ROI in terms of dollars and cents. So if we can hopefully all agree and understand that there is a distinct and unique ROI for investing in your people, the next question becomes, what does employee experience actually mean? What does it actually look like? So the good news is that for every organization around the world, and for every employee who works at those organizations, there are only 3 environments that shape every single employee experience for every employee at every company around the world. Big, small, industry doesn't matter, location doesn't matter. You have 3 things that you as an organization can control: culture, technology, physical space. How employees feel working for you, the tools and resources they have access to do their jobs, and the spaces in which employees work. 3 environments that you can shape. Now, think about a time when you had a job that you did not like, and you quit your job, and you went to go work for another organization. And chances are that other organization that you went to go work for, same industry, same company size, same geographic location. But now, all of a sudden, you love your job. What changed? It's not the work that changed. It's not the company, the type of work that you're doing. I mean, the thing that changed is the organization's ability to invest in these 3 environments of culture, technology, and physical space. So these 3 things shape all employee experiences for every employee. So let's start off with physical space. Physical space comprises 30% of an employee's overall experience. 30% comes down to physical space. Physical space refers to the art that might hang on the walls, the dogs that might be running through the office, right? All these things are a part of the physical space. And for a long time, we've always assumed that the physical space was just kind of, walls, ceilings, just a place to work. But what a lot of recent research is telling us now is that the physical space is actually much more. The physical space acts as a symbol for your organization. So think of your favorite superhero. Wonder Woman, Batman, Spider-Man, whoever it might be. They typically have their logos that they wear that symbolize what they stand for, what they represent. In the eyes of your employees, what represents your organization is the space in which employees actually work, the space that they see every day. And one of the best ways, or one of the things that employees care about most when it comes to physical space, is making sure that the values are physically manifested in the spaces in which employees work. Are the values manifested in the spaces in which employees work? So, simple test that you can do. You write down all your values on a sheet of paper, and then you walk around your office and you see if those values come to life. So why is that important? I'm willing to bet most of you in this room, the organizations that you work for, have values like innovation, trust, integrity, doing the right thing, humility, have fun. Right? Probably all of you in this room, your organization has at least 1 or 2 of those values. Do you think that your organization is unique in that way? Do you think that the values that you have are unique? That nobody else in this room or anywhere else has those values? No. The values themselves are not unique, they're words. What is unique is how and if those values actually come to life inside of your organization. So that makes a big difference. So you need to ask yourselves, do those values come to life? So again, physical space, 30% of an employee's overall experience. And I know there's a lot of debate about open spaces versus closed spaces. Probably many of you are having those debates and discussions internally within your organizations. But what we actually start to see is that the world's leading organizations don't focus just on open spaces or closed spaces. They focus on creating multiple workspace options. There's a company in the UK called Leesman, and they study how employees work. And they found that during the typical day, an employee will perform 21 different types of activities during the day. 21. Yeah, if you're doing 21 different types of things, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in a closed space or an open space. Neither one of those are going to be effective. So that's why the leading organizations are creating multiple workspace options for their people. Multiple workspace options. You might have some conference rooms, you might have some open spaces, some quiet spaces, some cafe areas, some team meeting spaces, right? So a variety of spaces for your employees to pick and choose from. That's what we're starting to see happen more and more. So that's physical space. 30% overall experience, physical space. The second environment is technology. Technology, these are the devices, the hardware, the software, the apps, all these different types of things that you use. This is where the technology environment comes into play. And if you think about it, a lot of the themes that we hear and talk about when we think about the future of work are powered by technology. Real-time recognition and feedback, communication and collaboration at scale, flexible work. All of this stuff is made possible by technology. And this is why I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in the IT space, or even in the HR space for that matter. Because a lot of you in this room are helping shape and drive and pioneer what the future of work and what these employee experiences look like inside of your organizations. So technology, again, 30% of the overall experience. Now, I remember a couple years ago, I went to go speak in Europe for a large financial institution. And after I gave a talk to a lot of the executive and management team there, I had the opportunity to meet some of the employees one-on-one. And I had some conversations with the employees there, and I would ask them, just tell me a little bit about the company, why you like working here. And after meeting with a bunch of employees, they would all tell me the same thing. We love the corporate culture. We love the physical space. We're all looking for a new job. And I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. If you love the corporate culture and you love the spaces in which you work, why would you want a new job? It's because it was a technology problem. I mean, think about what happens when technology inside of your organization breaks down. Right? We always assume technology is just an IT thing, but it's really not. Technology is a human thing. Because when technology breaks down, trust breaks down, communication breaks down, collaboration breaks down, employees start to become disengaged, they start to resent the organization, they can't actually do their jobs, and then they want to go elsewhere. So technology plays a very unique and pivotal role inside of organizations around the world. It really shapes and drives a lot of these themes around the future of work. Now, of course, I can't talk about technology without in some way talking about automation, right? And a lot of the debates that we're starting to hear, I'm sure a lot of you have seen and have heard some of those debates. So I'm actually curious, how many of you in this room, when you think about the future of technology and AI and automation, how many of you are optimistic about the future of technology? Put your hands up. How many of you are optimistic? Okay. Now, how many of you are a little bit, a little skeptical, maybe a little bit worried about the future of technology and automation? Okay. Maybe like 60-40, 70-30 kind of split. And that tends to be pretty common. So the really fascinating thing about technology, and I'm sure many of you have seen some of these articles. Some of the highest articles I've seen that say that 2 billion jobs will be automated in the coming years. 47% of the workforce will be automated. Right? I mean, it makes it sound like we're all just going to be walking around with pitchforks and shotguns like The Walking Dead. Right? That's basically what a lot of these pictures that have been painted would lead us to believe. And then you also see other things in the media that say how organizations like McDonald's are automating lots of jobs without losing any people. Or how Accenture automated 17,000 employees without losing a single person. And then you start to wonder, well, how is that happening? And when I interviewed a lot of these executives, what they always tell me is that Accenture, for example, automated 17,000 jobs, didn't lose a single person. The jobs that they automated were all in finance. These were people who would be considered number crunchers. And they took those 17,000 jobs, replaced all of them with bots and software. Don't need you to do any of that anymore. And then they took those 17,000 jobs, those 17,000 people, and they said, we're going to upskill you, and now your job is to be a strategic advisor to our clients. Your job is to help our clients understand how to make sense of the data, not to calculate the data. McDonald's putting in kiosks in a lot of their restaurants, and a lot of people think that the people who work in those stores, their jobs will be automated. When I spoke with their chief people officer, they said, actually, not only are we not reducing headcount, in some stores, we're increasing headcount. Why? Because they're focusing more on the customer experience. They're going to bring you your food. They're going to ask you how your day is going. They're going to change their core business model. And this, I think, is much more what we're starting to see. Humans plus AI and technology against problem. So how will jobs potentially be automated? I think two things can happen that will actually see, or will actually cause us to see a lot of jobs get automated. The first thing is that if business leaders and executives get together and they say, you know what, humans suck. We don't like people. Let's get rid of all of them, bring in the bots. So if we have CEOs and business leaders and executives around the world who say that, guess what? We're in trouble. Thankfully, we're not seeing that. Right? Instead, we're seeing more of the humans working with technology. The second way that I think we'll start to see jobs get automated depends on us as individuals. If we continue to just rely on educational institutions or on companies to teach us everything we need to know to be personally and professionally successful, we are at risk of being replaced. We need to take more accountability over our personal growth, over our professional development. We all as individuals have to become perpetual learners. That is, learning how to learn and taking responsibility ourselves over doing that. If we're able to do that, then we will be able to adapt to whatever the future of work might bring. The CEO of AT&T recently went in front of his entire organization and said, look, if you are not willing to be a super perpetual learner inside of our company, you should quit. We'll give you the tools, we'll give you the resources, we will do our best to try to support you in learning new things. But sometimes it might take your own resources. Sometimes you might need to use your own personal time to learn something. And if you're not willing to make that commitment to us, then you should quit. And I think we're going to start to see more organizations come forward with this type of messaging. So if we as individuals are willing to be those perpetual learners, we will be in very good shape. So I think those are the two ways that we will potentially be at risk of seeing a lot of technology automation happen. Executives coming together, which, again, don't think we're seeing, and being a perpetual learner. But the good news is it's never been easier to learn things today, right? It's never been easier. So that's the technology environment. 30% goes to technology. Technology shapes, empowers, and is the driving force behind a lot of the stuff around the future of work. The last environment is corporate culture. This isn't the environment that you can see or touch or taste. This is the environment that you feel. And this is why it's usually the hardest nut to crack for a lot of organizations around the world. Corporate culture is 40% of an employee's overall experience. I was never a good student, so when I graduated high school, my GPA was a 2.79. And then I went to community college and I bumped up that GPA to a whopping 2.8. And then I went to UC Santa Cruz. No banana slugs? One? Oh, a couple. Good, good. One over there. Very good. So I went to UC Santa Cruz. I double majored in economics and psychology, and I was super excited to join the corporate world. So I left UC Santa Cruz, went back home to LA, which is where I was from, and I started looking for jobs. And I interviewed for this organization, and when I interviewed there, they said, you are going to be doing a lot of wonderful work, the managers love you, great technologies, you know, the typical story. And I thought, great, this is why I worked so hard in college, so I'll take the job. And I was willing to forego my hour-and-a-half commute to work and back from work every day. So 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week driving just to get to and from work. But I took the job because of the story that I was told. A couple of months into my job, I'm doing data entry, I'm doing cold calling, and I'm doing PowerPoint presentations. And one day, a couple months into my job, the CEO comes out of his beautiful corner office in downtown Los Angeles, and he says, Jacob, get over here, I got an important project for you. Naturally, I got very excited. So I ran over to him and I said, yeah, what is it? And he puts his hand into his pocket and he takes out his wallet. And from his wallet, he produces a nice, crisp, clean $10 bill, slaps it in my hand and says, I'm late for a meeting. I need you to go down to Starbucks and get me a cup of coffee. And get yourself a latte as well. Thank you, you're so generous. And immediately I thought, what are you, out of your freaking loony-toony mind? This is why I worked so hard in college, is to get you a cup of coffee? You schmuck, get your own cup of coffee. That's what I thought on the inside. On the outside, I said, of course, I would love to get you that cup of coffee. Hope it burns your face off. And so that was one of the last full-time jobs I've ever had working for anybody else around 13 years ago. Now contrast this to a story that's oftentimes told about President Kennedy when he went to go visit the NASA Space Center. And the story goes that he's visiting the NASA Space Center, he's getting a tour, and as he's walking down the halls, he sees a man approaching him with a broom and a bucket. And President Kennedy stops the tour, and he goes up to the man and he says, "Hi, I'm President Kennedy, what do you do here?" And the man says, "I help put a man on the moon." He didn't say, "I restock the bathroom paper towels." He didn't say, "I sweep the floors." He said, "I help put a man on the moon." Culture, it matters. It makes a difference. It's how you feel about the organizations that you are a part of. And culture is something that we learn, and oftentimes it's something that we learn from many of you in this room. Many of you who are managers, who are CXOs, who are directors, who are VPs, a lot of the culture comes from you, leading by example. So these are the three environments that shape every single employee experience at every organization around the world. And so oftentimes when a lot of people say, what is the future of work? This is the future of work. Employee experience is the future of work. Because every company in the world can exist without technology, but no company in the world can exist without people. And so the organizations who do the best job of these three things are going to be able to attract and retain the very best. They will come up with the best ideas. They will service customers better than anybody else will. So this is the future of work. This is the next biggest area, competitive area for organizations. So where do you start? Where can you begin to start to invest and to think about employee experience inside of your own organizations? A couple things that you can start doing. The first thing is filter the stuff that you do through this lens. Right? If there's one thing that I hope you remember from anything that I've said, it's this. Every employee experience is shaped by three things that you can control and design for: culture, technology, physical space. So whatever strategic decisions that you're making, ask yourself how it impacts these three things. And the cool thing is that these three things also impact each other. Technology impacts culture. Technology impacts physical space. Right? These three things impact each other. They don't live in separate bubbles. So this is step number one. Right? Filter everything you do through this. The second thing that I encourage you to do is to put people in positions of power who care about this stuff, who understand the value, who believe in why investing in the human experience is so important. And a lot of the ways that we see this manifested is through mentoring programs, through coaching and mentoring. And a lot of organizations have this, which is great. But the problem with a lot of these programs inside of organizations is that when you dig deeper into some of them, the programs fall short towards the very end. So what happens in a typical program is that you take, ideally, a successful person, a more seasoned person, a more knowledgeable person, and you pair them up with somebody who is not as seasoned or experienced or knowledgeable. And the idea is that one will mentor and coach the other to make them more successful. And that idea and that concept works up until this person becomes almost as successful as this person. And then this person gets a little annoyed. And this person will hold this person at that same level for all eternity to make sure that they never get above. And this is the wrong way for us to think about coaching and mentoring programs. I mean, how many of you have kids? Okay, quite a few. Now, when your child does something that you couldn't do, or when they do something better than you, how many of you look at your child and say, "How dare you? I am your creator, you little punk. I couldn't do that. What the hell are you doing that?" Flick them over. You don't, hopefully. Right? Instead, you look at your child and you say, "Wow, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I was able to teach you that. That's great." Right? You get that little tear in your eye. Why don't we have that inside of our organizations when we think of coaching and mentoring and leadership? We need more of that. And so what I want to encourage you to think about is that as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, your job is to show up to work every day with this belief that your job is to help make other people more successful than you. If you believe that that is your job, then the actions that you take, the behaviors that you take, will all follow from that belief and from that mentality. So that's the second thing. Put the right people in positions of power who care about this stuff, who care and value the human side of work. The third thing that I want to encourage you to do is to think about the moments that matter inside of your organization. If you want to create great experiences for your people around culture, technology, and physical space, you have to understand the moments that matter to them. Now, if you think inside of most organizations, we typically have an employee life cycle, right? Attract, hire, nurture, retain, blah, 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 blah. But if you were to go up to any one of your employees inside of your company and say, hey, Bill, what stage are you in? Is Bill going to know what stage he's in? No. None of your employees know what stage they're in. You might know because that is how we as organizations have conveniently decided to bucket our people. But how would an employee respond to that? An employee would probably respond in terms of a moment. They would probably say something like, oh man, it's my first day. I'm very excited. I just got promoted. We just bought our first house. We're having our first kid. I'm having a tense relationship with my manager. So what are the moments that matter to your people? And the reason why these moments that matter are so important is because in the world of work, we're starting to see the blurring of work and life. And the blurring of work and life means that you can't just view your employees as workers anymore. You have to view your employees as individuals. Individuals outside of work as well. And that's why moments that matter are so crucial. And the best way to figure out what the moments that matter are for your employees is to ask them. There are a lot of moments that matter. They might not be the same depending on the organization that you look at. So find out what those moments that matter are. I can tell you there's no greater moment that matters that's wasted than an employee's first day on the job. I mean, think about it. The first day on the job, you're about to leave home, your spouse, your significant other is saying, oh, good luck, I hope you have a wonderful day. You're excited, you're driving to work. You show up to work, can't find a parking spot. So already you're a couple minutes late, you're frazzled, you're running through the front door, your clearance isn't set up yet, so somebody has to come down and get you. You're walked over to your desk, there's nothing there, there's a computer that's folded down with a Post-it note that says welcome. You open up the computer, you can't log into anything, now you gotta go to IT, you're frustrated. Now it's lunchtime, you go sit by yourself somewhere. And then your day's almost done, and you go home. And your spouse or your significant other says, honey, how was your day? And your first response immediately is, I don't know if I'm a good fit. I don't know if it's going to work out. Right? Nobody cares that I'm there. Nobody seems to acknowledge my presence. Nothing was working. The company didn't really put any time and effort into letting me feel like I'm even an employee. So an employee's first day on the job is one of those crucial moments that matters for every employee around the world. So what are the other moments that matters? You've got to ask your people. The last thing that I want to encourage you to think about is to view your organization much more like a laboratory and less like a factory. Factories are linear, they're process-centric, they're all about the status quo. And for decades, we have done an amazing job of building factories. Hierarchy, bureaucracy, legacy technologies, these are the classic constructions that make up a wonderful factory. And now, finally, we're trying to get rid of all of that because we don't want an organization who's static, who's pushing away change. We want an organization who's able to bring change in. So think of yourself as much more like a laboratory. You test, you experiment, you iterate, you embrace failure. Coaching and mentoring, using data, all of these different types of things matter. And if you're able to embrace those four things, you too will start to design and create amazing experiences for your people. Now there's a great quote which is oftentimes attributed to Spider-Man, which is, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Everybody knows that quote. But I think the opposite is also true. With great responsibility and with great accountability comes great power. And a lot of you in this room, you have a lot of responsibility. You have a lot of accountability, which also means that you have great power. Power to change, power to create amazing experiences for your organizations. So you have a lot of power. So I want you to think about, what does the future of work look like inside of your organizations? And what are you going to do to build that future of work? We all deserve to work for organizations that invest in our experience. And I want you to ask yourselves, wouldn't you want to work for that kind of an organization? Thank you.